Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Blessed One, the Worthy One, the Supremely Enlightened One. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, my dear friends, so today I have this sutta that I want to share with you. Maybe you might have listened to this teaching before. This is called Uṇṇābhabrāhmaṇasutta. Uṇṇābha is a name of a person and he was a Brahmin. So he came to the Buddha one day. So he came to the Buddha and asked some questions. Now let's see what he asked from the Buddha. Now at that time, the Buddha was in the city Savatthi, nowadays Varanasi. And he came to the Buddha and asked, there are these 5 sense faculties, good Gautama, of different spheres, different action, and they do not share in each other's sphere of action. Now he said to the Buddha, so the Buddha's name was the Gautama. So the Buddha Gautama. So he asked Buddha, there are these 5 sense faculties. So he done a certain experiment or investigation about himself. So he found out some questions. So he said, well, Buddha, there are these 5 sense faculties which are, now he said, of different spheres, different actions, and they do not share in each other's sphere of action. Which 5? The sense of sight, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. Now, he said that they have their own range, their own sphere, and they also have their own actions, which means, my friends, so that when it comes to the eye, the sense of eye, so it interacts with the sights. But this eye has a different scope, this different sphere. It does not mix with the sounds, smells, or taste, which means the only function that the eye can give is to watching the forms. It can look the forms and it can grasp and perceive the sights. But that's only the function the eye has. And when it comes to the ear, we only can perceive the sounds from the ear, but it does not mix with the forms, smells, taste, touch. This way, we can say that each and every sense faculties has its own duty and it has own range and it also have its own sphere and it also have its own different actions, which means the eye engage with the form, ear engage with the sounds, nose engage with the smells, tongue engage with the taste, and body with the touch. As these 5 faculties are of different scope and range and do not share in each other's sphere of action, what is their result? And who profits from their combined activity? So that's what he asked from the Buddha. He asked, now, They have different ranges, they have different scope, they have different actions, but what is their result and who profits from their combined activity? So, what is the meaning of result, my friends? Now, the resort is where
No.
that usually we go in holidays, isn't it? So we usually go to a resort and we spend some time and we will be there for some duration, some time and we come back. That's usually the meaning of the resort. But here the resort stands for somewhere that takes the protection, or that in Sinhalese, the term, when it's translated from the Pali term, it is pilisarana, which means it has the protection. It resort for the protection. Actually, even that we when we go to a somewhere to reside in holidays, I mean for a resort, what we will have is the protection there. So now he asks, what is the resort and who profits from their combined activity? When these sense faculties perceive all the stuffs, when it interacts with the outside world, such as form, sound, smell, taste, touch, and who profits from this? Where is its resort? And he asks, what is it goes for its own protection? Now the Buddha say, there are Brahman, these five sense faculties, which do not share in each other's sphere of action. Mind is their resort, and it is mind that profits from their combined activity. So the mind is the uppermost factor when it comes to the sense faculties. What governs our sense faculties is the mind. I mean that when it comes to the mind, so the mind has this interact with the senses, eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. So mind as the basis, there arise eye consciousness. Mind as the basis, there arise ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and body consciousness. So the mind is in that moment what profits and what for the senses, what is the result. So now, my friends, now let's try to apply to our usual experience. Now in our lives, you might have seen like sometimes people get angry. So when we get angry, say that the anger occupies our mind. Let's say we get anger for some certain person. So then when we our mind is left like invaded by anger, we show up by our body, and sometimes we don't like to see the person who we have the anger. So we become so much resistant for that person. But originally the anger was in the mind, not just in the eye, but when our mind is overcome by anger, so we don't like to see the people who we get angry for. And we don't like to hear when they speak, when the mind is angry. And we don't like to the smell or something. They say somebody like prepare food, so but we have anger for that person. We don't like that taste to taste it. And we don't even like to touch something belonging to that person. Why? Because the mind has this connection with our senses. Let's say sometimes we have greed for something. Let's say we have greed for some kind of a food, maybe like for an pizza or something like a cake or anything. So when there is greed in the mind, so which is very usual, like very common, so we like to see by our eyes what we desired and greed for. We like always to see that delicious food. And we like to hear the sound when the people talk about, the pizza. When we smell that and when we taste that, we feel it. Because the mind is already overcame with the greed towards a certain food. Let's say we have fear in the mind. When the mind is overcame with the fear, it shows up from our senses. So this is why Buddha say one takes the resort in the mind for the protection when it comes to the sense objects, as long as the mind is not like in a balanced way, if the mind is not well trained, so our sense faculties also absorb that. So it shows us in our senses. So because of that, the Buddha said, mind is their resort. It is mind that profits from their combined activity. So then he asked, but good Gautama, Buddha, what is mind's resort? So he asked, where does the mind seek for its protection? Where does that mind goes for its resort? The Buddha said, mind's resort, Brahmin, is mindfulness. So the mindfulness brings the protection to the mind. Which means like when we develop mindfulness, when we practice meditation, when we focus our mind into our breathing, so we develop our mindfulness, and that mindfulness is what protects this mind and the rest of the other senses. Now, in Buddhist teachings, in Buddhist perspective, the mind is also acts like a sense faculty towards the mental objects. But now the Buddha say, when it comes to the resort, so it is mindfulness that protects all the senses, which means when you develop mindfulness, you can call up all the senses towards you. So you will have that protection towards all your senses. So the mindfulness, in sometimes Buddha explain it from a simile. So the Buddha say it is like a guardian. The guardian, or let's say a security personnel, is standing in front of the bank. So he know who is going inside and we know who is comes outside. So he is standing in front of the door. So the same way, the mindfulness stands in the front of our eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and the mind itself. That's why it is very important to develop the mindfulness. It is really important to develop the meditations, because if there is no mindfulness, whatever comes up to the mind, whatever the mind works with, let's say if it is anger, so all the senses go to the direction of that angry mind. Let's say the other side, the loving kindness. When we develop the loving kindness in our mind, when we develop it well, so the mind becomes so brightened and purified with the loving kindness. So then it shows up through our senses. We like to see others, they are having happiness. We like to hear other people having happiness. And we like to offer food for others. So we give help to others by our body. So the Buddha said the mindfulness is the protection. So the mindfulness is the resort, mind's resort. Brahmin is the mindfulness. Then he asked again, then good Gautama, what is the resort of mindfulness? So where does the mindfulness should go for its protection? Where it stands on? Where it's established on? Where is this mindfulness resort to? Now the Buddha say, the resort of mindfulness, Brahmin, is liberation. So when a person is liberated, which is free, from suffering, when he is free, they have always the mindfulness. They have ongoing mindfulness always in their life. So because of that liberation. Now the liberation is, my friends, the liberation from the greediness, liberation from the anger, and liberation from the delusion. When a person develop the noble eightfold path, so they achieve the liberation. With that liberation, what they have done is they abandon the greediness, they abandon the anger, and they also abandon the fear, which means delusion. So after abandoning that unskillful mental states in the mind, they can confirm completely full mindfulness in their life. So that is why the Buddha say the resort of mindfulness, Brahmin, is the liberation. When a person is liberated, they will have this mindfulness forever. So Buddha, when it comes to the Buddha's life, so because Buddha doesn't have any craving in the Buddha's mind, so the well purified mind, so the Buddha had that mindfulness. Because the Buddha had the mindfulness, he had this all the senses according to his own wish. The senses together with the mind is always obeyed. Now the Buddha once said about this by a simile that there is a chariot, and this chariot is attached with 6 horses, and the charioteer take all the reins to a one hand and take the gold stick to the other hand, and he takes all the horses wherever that he want to go. So the charioteer, the driver, can turn wherever the horses that he need. So that way, so this charioteer has full authority all the horses when he has this holding all the reins in one hand and holding the goat stick from the other hand. And the Buddha say the holding of the all the reins in one hand is the mindfulness. So God's stick is the knowledge, is the well-developed knowledge. So they can control their senses according to their own wish. So because that they have this full mindfulness and they have this liberation. You know, when it comes to Buddha's life, because the Buddha liberated, so Buddha never had any sort of a fear. Now, one day the Mara came to frighten the Buddha when the Buddha was outside meditating, and he started to make some noise in order to make the Buddha's mind terrified. But Buddha did not had any sort of a resistance or reaction by being frightened. And Buddha say, Mara, so I know you are Mara, so whatever you make to terrify the Buddha, you cannot do that to the Buddha. So even Buddha say, even these earthquakes and the sky falls and all the beings in the world trembles with a fear. Even somebody pierce a spear onto the Buddha's heart. Buddha does not seek the survival by the attachments. He does not seek for escape for his life in attachment, which means in greed, anger, or fear. So that is the liberation. That is what we call the liberation. So my friends, Buddha said the result of mindfulness, Brahmin, is the liberation, which means if we develop the Noble Eightfold Path, we'll get this chance to attain the mindfulness, and so that we can have this sense faculties, which is very calm and which is very developed, and with which we can control these sense faculties. The controlling of the sense faculties is not, I mean, not in a way of like being like making it permanent, but by fully understanding the nature of the sense faculties, they'll get this opportunity to free. So that's the purpose of our spiritual life. Now he asks, then good Gautama, what is the result of liberation? Now, where does one resort for the protection in liberation? And then Buddha answered, the resort of liberation is Nibbana. The Nibbana is, my friends, the enlightenment. Nibbana is the awakening to the Four Noble Truths. When a person attain the awaken to the suffering, the cause of the suffering, end of the suffering, and a way leading to the end of the suffering, when they gain that knowledge, they'll attain the Nibbana, which means the enlightenment, which means the extinguishment. So they have this knowledge over their life with the Four Noble Truths. And that's the main goal in Buddha's teachings. So when one needs to liberate, they need to attain the Nibbana. So then this person asks again, then good Gautama, what is the result of Nibbana? Now he asks, where does one resort for the protection when it comes to Nibbana? So then the Buddha said, that question goes too far, Brahman. No answer can encompass it. The aim of the holy life, Brahman, is immersion in Nibbana. It has Nibbana for its final end, Nibbana for its conclusion. Now see, now that is the final goal to attain Nibbana. So we can say that if somebody is fed up with suffering, if somebody is like, let's say somebody come to meditate, when I'm asking why you came to meditate, so they will answer me, we came to meditate because we need mindfulness. Now in that point, because they never heard about mindfulness practices, but when they live their household life, they might experience so much stress. So then they ask, oh, I need to develop mindfulness. Now they came for protection, isn't it? They seek for protection in mindfulness. That's why they came and they asked, so I need to develop mindfulness. So they wanted to have some sort of training to their mind. That's why they're trying to resort into the mindfulness. So the same thing was happened with this Brahmin. So the Brahmin asked, what is the resort for the mindfulness? Now, sometimes people like satisfy with only with a simple mind meditation and mindfulness. They don't ask what is the resort, what is the protection for the mindfulness, what comes next the mindfulness. If somebody asks from Buddha, the Buddha will answer them that it is liberation. If you liberate, so you have mindfulness always with you. So then if they ask, if they want to develop furthermore, they will ask what is the reason for the liberation. They will give the answer Nibbana. Buddha will give the answer Nibbana. So then good Gautama, what is the result for the Nibbana? So he said, that question goes too far, Brahmin. No answer can encompass it. The aim of the holy life, Brahmin, is immersion in Nibbana. So that is the goal, that is the end, that is what we are uh, developing this spiritual path to attain Nibbana, which means there is a protection at the end when as long as the person attain Nibbana. So that is the overcoming of all the suffering. The Brahman Uṇṇābha was delighted with words of the Blessed One and rejoiced in them. He rose, saluted the Buddha, and departed. Not long after his departure, the Blessed One said to the monks, "Monks, imagine a house or pavilion with a peaked roof with a window to the east. When the sun rises and its rays strike through the window, what do they rest on? On the western wall, Lord. Just so, monk, the faith of the Brahman Uṇṇābha is settled on the Tathagata, on the Buddha, rooted in him, established in him. It is strong and cannot be uprooted by any recluse, Brahman, Deva, Mara, Brahma, or anyone else in the world. So he attained that Dhamma by uprooting the doubt, and that cannot be shaken by anyone in the world, because now it is his own experience. Now the Buddha addressed him to his own experience by this teaching, so now he fully understood the Dhamma in his own life. So because of that, so Buddha praised a lot about this Uṇṇābha Brahmin. Monks, if the Brahman Uṇṇābha were to die now, when if he died right now, there is no fetter to bind the Brahman Uṇṇābha and cause him to return to this world, which means anagami, which means he only reborn in the higher realm, Brahma world, and does not come back to human world because he remove all that fetters. That is how he attained these practices in the Buddha's teaching. So he attained these stages of awakening by listening to this teaching. So my friends, so that is the teaching, the short teaching I shared with you today. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.